Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us today. I am Alina Islam, and I'm a mining analyst here at Red Cloud Securities. I'm very excited to present Vizsla Copper to you today. They are exploring for copper, gold, molybdenum deposits in British Columbia and have 4 properties in total, but the company's flagship project is the Woodjam project in the Quesnel terrain, where it ran a drill program in 2024. Vizsla Copper is a spin-out of Vizsla Silver and is backed by Inventa Capital. To introduce you to the company, as well as discuss upcoming plans, we have with us Craig Parry, Chairman and CEO. Once Craig's presentation is over, we will conclude with a Q&A session, so please put your questions into the chat box and we'll get through as many as we can. But before we get started, I do need to mention the fine print. For Vizsla Copper, there may be some forward-looking statements made on this webinar. Please read the cautionary note on page 2 of the Vizsla Copper corporate presentation located on the company's website. For Red Cloud Securities, I would highlight that this webinar is for information purposes only and should not be considered a solicitation to purchase or sell securities or a recommendation to buy or sell securities. We note that this webinar does not take into account the particular situation or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigation and seek their own professional advice before investment. Please see our most recent research located on our website for Vizsla Copper specific disclosures. And with that, I'll hand it over to you, Craig. Please take it away.
Thank you for that comprehensive introduction, Alina. Much appreciated. And thank you all for joining us today. I'll try and keep this as punchy as we can. I like to talk about copper markets. It's I've been in the exploration and mining business for 25 years now. 8 of that with Rio Tinto, and largely a lot of that on copper exploration and development and business development around the world. So we'll touch on copper supply, demand, where we think the copper price might go, and then a bit of a tale of sort of persistence and success on some of our projects and the history there, and where we're going with them. We are focused in British Columbia. As I say, I've been doing copper exploration for 25 years now. I spent 2 years in Antofagasta in Chile with Rio Tinto, searching the Andes for copper deposits before moving on to Asia and the Tethys. So I've spent a lot of time looking at porphyry coppers, and there's some interesting things there. And one of the reasons we're in British Columbia is that I take the view that British Columbia has the opportunity to become one of the world's great copper producing centres. It's already a major copper producer, but could be much larger. And so we think there's opportunity there in a good, safe, stable jurisdiction to do more work and really advance things. This slide, look, we're updating it as we speak because we've had some big news here in the past few days out of British Columbia. I include this there because we saw something of a change last year in the market, and now we're seeing it writ large. The market's sort of really been very much in the doldrums for all juniors in recent times, but we're starting to see things pick up whereby when you make a discovery, you can do very well. Now, Hercules Silver was something that came out of our office here. They made a major porphyry discovery down in Idaho. But here over the last week, we've seen a company called A-Mark. It's a Hunter Dickinson company. A-Mark announced some really very, very good drill holes. I wouldn't say they're spectacular, but, a couple of 100 metres at sort of 1.5% copper is a very, very good start for those guys. Their share price has gone from about 15 cents a couple of months ago all the way to 50 cents today. The company next door, TDG, their share price has jumped from about 10 cents all the way up to 40 cents here in the last 24 hours of trading. So that's really positive news. I think it means that discoveries are starting to be factored in again. If you go back a year and a half, 2 years ago, discoveries in the copper space weren't being rated at all, and you didn't see much of a bounce in share price. That's changed dramatically here over the last couple of months, and I think it's important to note when you're looking to invest in copper juniors and copper explorers, that you're now a chance to see serious returns from good exploration work. So discoveries still very, very much matter, or matter once again. And so there's opportunity there. What happens when you get a copper boom? Now, I take the view that the copper price at the moment, we're trading at $4.14 today. It's been as high back in April, May last year of $5.10, all-time highs. We know the market is very, very tight, and you're seeing really major demand side pickup, particularly with the electrification thematic. But the thing that's caught us off guard last year that drove the copper price to all-time highs was this build-out of data centers that you're seeing going on around the world. So we're really, you're starting to see corporates take over from governments in building their own power infrastructure. For example, Microsoft, Bill Gates is spending $10 billion building a new solar farm for one of his data centers. They've encouraged the US government to start 3 Mile Island nuclear reactor again. So you're starting to see real demand for metal and energy coming out of corporates, particularly in the US, but also globally. So we think that, and if you go back to 2000 to 2011, when I started with Rio Tinto, the copper price was about 71 cents a pound. It then went to $4.60 a pound over the next 7 years. So the copper price has propensity to really jump very, very seriously. There it went up 6 times. I wouldn't be surprised if this time around we see much, much higher prices, $20, $30 per pound copper at the back end of this decade. The demand is looking after itself, and you don't have to take my word for it. BHP, Trafigura, the trading houses, all have great economists that are predicting that we need an extra 7 to 8 million tonnes of production per annum at the back end of this decade into early next decade. The market at the moment is a 21 million tonne per annum market, growing to about 30 million tonnes per annum over that time frame. That's the same change in supply-demand fundamentals that we saw last time around from 2000 to 2007, and that was enough to increase the metal price 6 times. This time, however, the supply side is much more constrained. I can tell you, having scoured the globe for copper projects over the last 5 years, there aren't many quality projects out there. Very hard to find. There hasn't been enough exploration, not enough permitting, and not enough studies done to really fill that supply-demand gap that we see emerging. So I think the only way that's going to correct itself is if you see extraordinarily high prices, and I think they're coming just around the corner. And what happens when you see a change in metal prices like that? Well, Oxiana, my mentor and business partner in Australia, Owen Hegarty, started that company back in 2000. It had a market cap of $6 million. By the time Owen and I left, it was a $12 billion company. So there we show, it was a 100 bagger, but from about 2000, it was really actually a 200 bagger. You don't see too many of those in your life. So the copper market has great propensity to really deliver outsized shareholder returns, and that's why we're doing what we're doing here, is really trying to put our foot on as many quality pounds in a good jurisdiction as we possibly can, and then look to ride this wave. Our strategy, very, very simple, and I'm happy to take as many questions as you like on the copper price, because I think the next 12 to 24 months, this is where you're going to see, it's in this part of the market, you're going to see really tremendous returns. I also think the silver price is about to rally. It's a very, very tight market there. 20% undersupply, fundamental undersupply, primary undersupply. Looks a little bit like the uranium market setup from 2005 to 2007 to me. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see a serious silver squeeze and dramatically higher silver prices, potentially $100 per pound per ounce of silver in the not too distant future. So I think they're the two key parts of the market here that are going to do very well over the next 12 to 24 months. Of course, we've seen gold perform very well, and that will continue to happen. But I think copper and silver are the next great wins for anyone who invests in this sector. Jurisdiction, we love British Columbia. We've been able to get our drill permits on time. We're working with our First Nations partners on all of our projects and successfully getting agreements in place and partnering with them. And, we get a little bit of a bad rap. Certainly some of our governments in Canada have thrown up some challenges for us, but a lot of projects have been permitted over the last couple of years. If you look at Stephen Dean's Artemis, for example, at Skeena, I've been the chairman of Skeena for the past 7 years. I'm now the lead director. We've advanced our permitting on Eskay Creek there. So you can get things done in British Columbia. It's a good jurisdiction and it's a safe jurisdiction. No one's going to come along and steal your asset off you. Timing's an interesting one right at the moment. Our share price, if you go back 18 months ago, we're trading sort of in the 20-cent range. We're now back at 5 or 6 cents today. And all that means is that investors are throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Now's an extraordinary time to buy. And on that note, I've been in the market buying Vizsla Copper stock myself. I bought 1 million shares last week on market, and I continue to keep buying. So look out for those SEDI reports from me as I continue to build up my position. But timing is all important in this sector. Doesn't hurt to be a little bit too early, and I think if you were to come in now into this space, you're not early at all. Leverage, we mentioned that we've got good access to capital. We write big checks ourselves, so that helps, and we can buy stock on the market ourselves. But we've got a fantastic group of people here as well, so we're leveraging our capital markets experience, our marketing capability, and a tremendous team of explorers that I've got here to advance our projects. Just digging into those a little bit. So, some of you may be familiar with me. I was the founder of, when I left Rio Tinto, I started a number of companies, including Tigers Realm Coal. Probably the most significant that you may know is Next Gen Energy. Lee Courier, myself and Chris McFadden started Next Gen back in 2010. Of course, that's gone very well. It's now $1 billion company. I moved to Canada in 2016 to start ISO Energy. I bought some projects out of NextGen, and we made the Hurricane discovery. Steve Blower's up there on the screen now. Steve was my VP of exploration there and led the team to the discovery of the Hurricane deposit. That became a $500 million success story. Vizsla Silver, of course, Mike Conant and I started that back 2018. It's now just nudging on to $1 billion market capitalization. We're going to be building one of the biggest, possibly the biggest silver mine on the planet. And then that's with the help of Simon Smirlek, who joined us from Ossenko Engineering. Simon and I have been mates for the past 20 years or so. Simon's one of the world's great mine builders. He's built over 50 mines around the world, including 14 major ones over the last 14 years. So we've got a tremendous bench strength of explorers and developers. We set ourselves a little bit apart from a lot of other groups here in Vancouver. Certainly, we like to develop projects ourselves and advance those into production where we can. But if there's one thing to take away from this is that, and Skeena, of course, I've been involved in Skeena since 2016. Walt and I wrestled control of Skeena and bought Eskay Creek and Snip off Barrick. And that's now a $1.8 billion company. So if there's a thematic here, it's the fact that we're used to taking $10, $20 million micro cap companies, doing good work, doing good exploration, good development work, and advancing those up into the billions of dollars in valuation. And that's what we plan to do with Vizsla Copper. I've touched on this. Could copper reach $20 a pound? I think it absolutely will. People say I'm mad. I know I'm not. I'm not out there on my own on this. Robert Friedland's now saying $30 or $40 a pound copper, and that's simply because this demand continues to grow unabated, but the supply side is so very, very constrained. So I think we're going to see much higher copper prices, and that's going to, all boats rise with that tide, and we'll see that that happen writ large over the next 5 years, I think. A little bit more about British Columbia, and jurisdiction is so important. I'd love to go to the Congo and find something there. I just don't think it gives me or gives our investors the security and safety they need, that they'll continue to own those assets. There's no issues with that here, and you have a wonderful suite of things going on in British Columbia. You've got big deposits, lots of exploration upside. Not enough work's been done on these deposits over the last 10 years to really unlock value from them. You've got low-cost, clean hydropower energy everywhere, good access to water, and good rail and road infrastructure as well. So we think it's a good place to invest, and we're not the only ones. So you're seeing BHP, Teck, Fortescue, all making big investments. Fortescue, interestingly enough, they've just been in my office here today. They did something pretty interesting, and they staked a vast tract of ground just to the west of our Woodjam property. It's a 300-kilometre by 50-kilometre wide swathe of ground, looking for the kind of deposits that we've got. So the majors are here in a big way, and things are heating up in British Columbia with this discovery, AMARC's discovery, which was announced on Monday. So I think it's a great place to operate, and good to see the majors coming in a major way. Zooming into our projects, and I don't want to get too deep in the weeds, and certainly happy to answer a lot of questions, but we're in the southern half of British Columbia. Our Woodjam project is right next door to Williams Lake. This is the first time in my life where I've had a project that I can drive out my door and be on via road access in under 5 hours. Tremendous location. Copperview sits down next to Kodiak's Gate Zone, great place to explore for copper. And then lastly, our Poplar project sits on a major road that goes down to the Huckleberry mine just south of Houston. So in great locations here in southern British Columbia, and of course all that access to wonderful low-cost grid power here in BC. Quick summary of the projects there. Of course, we can't put it in writing, but across our Woodjam and Poplar projects, we've now got a combined 4 billion pounds of copper metal in the ground and nearly 2 million ounces of gold. They're really our flagship projects at the moment. And then a huge amount of exploration potential on each of those projects, which I'll come to as we get into this. Woodjam project, just quickly, sits 40 kilometres to the east of the major town of Williams Lake, just off the highway that runs to Alaska, of course. It sits 10 kilometres south of the Mount Polly mine, so it's a proven porphyry copper terrain. It's an interesting project. This is a sort of tale of persistence. The guys we bought it off, Bill Morton at Consolidated Woodjam, they staked most of this ground about 30 years ago and then slowly explored it over the next 30 years, partly in help with help from the likes of Goldfields. And Goldfields had this project from 2010 to 2013. They saw it as one of their leading, they actually tell us that it was their second most important exploration project globally. Of course, 2013 came along, everyone cut their exploration budgets next to zero, and Goldfields pulled out of the project but remained a shareholder in the company, so they sit on the register as a holder in the company. The really interesting thing about this, if you look at these black dots, very big property area, that's about sort of 35 kilometres east-west by 30 or 40 kilometres north-south. It's about 100,000 hectares now. But these black dots are the porphyries that have been discovered on the property to date. So of the 8 targets that have been tested on this property, 6 of them have resulted in porphyry copper discoveries, which I think is I've never seen such a positive rate of conversion of target to discovery. So there's something special about the earth crust in this neck of the woods. And it's a fabulous place to explore and find copper projects. The value of the company, I mentioned timing up front there. There's no better time to get involved now. And I suppose one of the key indicators that people have told me over the years that you should be buying stock yourself is when you see the board and management buying stock. We've all taken, big, I think I've put in over 1.5 million of my own money into this so far. As I mentioned, I bought 1 million shares on market last week. I'll continue to buy. And the reason being is that a $13 million valuation is way more than underpinned by the existing resource base we have here. So we've got 263 million tonnes at about 0.4% copper. Importantly, some of that is very high grade. So there's 33 million tonnes at 0.7% copper equivalent in there. And within that, and not factored into the resource base at the moment, you see these drill results in recent times that suggests there's some higher grade zones there. 51 metres at 1.6% copper, 110 metres at 2.6 gold and 0.4 copper, and 361 at 0.84 gold and copper. So we know, there are high grade zones to this system, and that's what we're bringing to the table here, is just looking at those high grade zones, bringing good geology to the projects and understanding those high grade zones a bit better, so that we can pull out a higher grade resource that will be an economic project in the not too distant future. I mentioned some of the history of the project there. It's probably over, I think we've spent 15 million on the project ourselves to date. So there's now over 50 million spent on the project, drilling out these known discoveries, these known porphyry centres. Very importantly, great location. There's a major road runs through here to the town of Horsefly, which sits on the property. You can see from that image it's been heavily logged, and it's a mining area, given that Mount Polly's just up the road from us. So tremendous location. We have year-round access, so when the market decides that it's willing to support drilling in winter, we can do that as well. Current exploration. So we put out some really good results last year. I think the market reacted well to those, and then we saw a sell-off in copper juniors as that copper price came back from $5 all the way down to $4 over the last 6 months. But we put out some beautiful drill results, 100 metres or thereabouts at 1.1% copper, 51 at 0.64% copper, 1.6 grams per tonne gold over 86 metres from our southeast deposit, which is down here. And then our Deerhorn, I mentioned Deerhorn and Megaton. Importantly, and you can see here, one of the first things we did when we got onto the property was do a mag survey over the entire property. We were a little bit astonished with what we saw. When you're looking for porphyry coppers, in a simple sense, what you're looking for in mag signatures is donut-shaped anomalies, because you get magnetite destruction at the centre of porphyry centres, and hence you end up with these donut-shaped anomalies. And if you look on just that part of the map, which is a very small part of the property, there's over 10 very clear donut-shaped anomalies, including those associated with the known porphyries and the discoveries there, this sort of truncated donut here. So we've got over 103 discrete mag targets. The first one we tested, which was a bit of a different style of anomaly here, like this mag low at southeast, is this area here we call Megaton. And we immediately intersected porphyritic rocks with quite a bit of copper in them. We're well off the centre there, but we need to follow that up. But the very first target we tested ourselves resulted in a discovery. So we think there's something very special about this part of the Earth's crust. It has the propensity to deliver many, many discoveries, as it has in the past. The southeast deposit, zooming in on that area a little bit, you can see some of the historic holes there. Been some really very, very good hits across that. The bulk of the resource sits there at the moment. As I mentioned, there's 51 metres at 1.6% copper and 0.8 grams per tonne gold. Importantly, the last drill campaign we did in September last year, demonstrated to us that this target is completely open to the south. So we're excited about that, and we want to continue to follow that up. I mentioned this megaton DCIP anomaly that resulted in a discovery. We want to get back in here in summer and continue to test that and try and find the centre of that porphyry system. And then we've got these other fantastic deposits up here that have higher grades to them as well. Southeast deposit, as I say, I don't want to get in the weeds here, but one of the things we did discover in this drill campaign that we completed last year is that the mineralisation comes much closer to the surface than we expected. Here it's about 50 to 60 metres below this shallow free digging glacial till overburden. So we're starting to find surprises there and suggestions that deposit continues to be open to the south, and importantly higher up in the sequence, so we won't have to do a massive strip on that deposit to get to the mineralisation. The Deerhorn deposit, this is the most exciting thing I think that's been discovered on the property to date. The very high-grade core, you can see this mess of red drill holes here. Some really spectacular results from that zone. 123 metres at 2% copper. And I think this is an important takeaway. A lot of people don't realise that we have such high grades on the property. 70 metres at 3% copper, including 16 metres at 5% copper, 138 metres at 1.4% copper, including 54 at 1.7% copper. So it's a very high-grade core to that deposit. At the moment, that equates to 33 million tonnes at 0.7% copper equivalent. I think that's going to be very much economic in the not-too-distant future. So we're looking at that and a mine development scenario around that as we speak. I should also make the point that what we found from this last drill campaign is that this Deerhorn deposit and that high-grade zone is completely open to the south. So I would expect that when we get back in there and start drilling, we'll make more, discover more high-grade mineralisation and continue to grow that high-grade resource. Interestingly enough, we also put on this map these black circles. These are some of the discrete mag targets that we've come up with from that mag survey. We've now done some IP over these and starting to prove up some outstanding looking targets. And I think we're, a very good chance of further discoveries as we keep going on that property. These are just some sections to better explain how this is open. And you'll note here, this is the last hole we drilled of the campaign this year. We hit 68 metres at 1.3% copper and confirmed that high-grade zone is open to the south. So I'd expect that high-grade copper resource to continue to grow. So it's a very exciting project for us. Megaton, I did mention that, we've got this DCIP anomaly. It's the first target we've come up with and tested ourselves and resulted in an immediate discovery of a porphyry copper system. The results, nothing too much to write home about at the moment, 110 metres at 0.2% copper and 0.01 grams per tonne gold, so about 0.26% copper equivalent. But it's indicated to us that we've drilled off the centre of the porphyry system and that we need to chase the centre of that porphyry system to the northeast up here, and I think we're a good chance of expanding that discovery and fleshing it out, and that discovery turning into something very important to us over the next 12 months. Three Firs, I'll touch on this simply because it's a sort of exciting story. It's changed a little bit since we last spoke to the market. Back in September, we drilled through a breccia pipe or breccia dike that had within it class of high-grade, very potassically altered, intensely stockworked porphyry copper mineralisation. What that reminded us of is the far southeast deposit, something that Dick Silito is accredited with discovering in the Philippines, very large high-grade copper resource. He discovered that through the same characteristics as we're seeing here. He noted that there was some very high-grade, intensely altered class of porphyry mineralisation in a breccia sitting next to a large anomaly, a geophysical anomaly. They then tested those anomalies around that breccia and found out that it was hiding a world-class porphyry system. Same thing here. We've got this breccia class. We need to go back in and test better test this anomaly, this IP anomaly that we've got there, and see what we have. That might be something that we farm out to the majors. I know the majors are very interested in these sorts of things. Everyone knows that famous far southeast story. So I think we're a good chance of attracting a major to further test that thesis. These are the little bit unclear, but these breccia clasts you can see, and that's very intense, really interesting geology, very, very intensely stockwork porphyry system. So we know there's potentially a beast hiding next to our Three Firs deposit. Over to Poplar, or up north to the Poplar deposit, we bought Poplar through the acquisition of Universal Copper. Back in March last year, we paid the princely sum of $2.7 million in stock in the company to buy a project that's had over $50 million in today's dollars spent on it. The Poplar project's great location. As you can see there, we're surrounded by some major porphyry discoveries and Imperial Metals Huckleberry mine, which is situated on a porphyry copper deposit. These other things, Berg and Burgett, Ox and Seal, are owned by Surge Copper. There's a number of other porphyries that have been discovered in this area. So it's, again, proven terrain, great location. The mine road to Huckleberry goes right across the property. You've got grid power going across the property. So, again, has all the advantages of operating in this fantastic jurisdiction. And then, importantly, again, undulating terrain, good access, year-round access, and heavily logged. So it's, it's not virgin country. And you can see a lot of outcrop on the ground. So that's very helpful to our geologists when we go to explore it. But the Poplar deposit itself was discovered in the 70s by Utah Copper. You can see some of the drill results from the deposit from recent years. Big thick intercepts of 0.4% copper right from surface. That's the most important thing here. So virtually no strip ratio when it comes to developing the project. Large resource base already, as you can see there, and contained metal. There's over 2 billion pounds of copper and 750,000 ounces of gold at that sort of grade of about 0.43% copper equivalent. So, I would rate that as modest grade. Global head grade's now about 0.5% copper, and some of the Canadian or British Columbia porphyry systems they produce from, if you look at Copper Mountain, their head grade now is about 0.2% copper. So you can build projects on this, and certainly when we see $20 per pound copper, this kind of project will be valued much more highly than they are being now. This map important in that it shows the geology, but the interesting thing about this map is that you can see these grey circles here. That's the drill holes on the Poplar deposit. Poplar deposit, as I mentioned, was found in the 70s. It had underwent a number of drill campaigns over the next 30 years, 40 years. But the explorers really focused on the low-hanging fruit because the deposit itself outcropped, and they really sat there and just drilled that out. There's been hardly any other work. We know this is prime porphyry terrain, and yet there's been very, very little work done on the property, elsewhere on the property to explore for these systems. You can see a smattering of shallow, mostly RC drill holes down in the south and out here to the east. But for the most part, this is completely unexplored, which is interesting because when we got out there in May and hit the ground running, I had 5 geologists out there. We scoured the area, and what we came up with is to the south of the Poplar deposit itself, the Poplar South target. You can see a very large mag anomaly, and when we got out on the ground, we were quite astonished with what we see. We saw a 10-kilometre by 5-kilometre wide zone of propylitic alteration. We saw a hole in the middle of the mag, another donut-shaped anomaly, which was exciting to see. We saw a number of porphyritic rocks in a pit down here to the south, and a lot of copper staining on those rocks. So we thought this looks very, very interesting. So we dug in. We did some soil geochemistry over the area, and we came up with a classic zone soil in soil geochem anomaly. Lots of copper, high-grade copper at the centre, surrounded by a lower-grade zinc halo. Very typical of what you would see associated with a porphyry system. We've now completed, and we put news out last week on our IP results. We may have a slide on that here. No, we don't. But the IP results were telling as well. Right at the centre of that mag low and at the centre of that copper anomalism is a very high, a very serious chargeability high, way higher than we expected. So it suggests there's a lot of sulfide in the middle of that system. I think, as I say, I've been doing porphyry exploration for 25 years now. This is really, the most typical porphyry target that I've ever seen in 25 years. This is textbook, where all of the vectors, including magnetics, soil geochem, IP, chargeability, and mapping, all say drill here. So that's what we plan to do in June. I think that's a very, very strong chance of being a new porphyry discovery, and then it becomes a question of tons and grade. Now, that's a very forward-looking statement, but I've not been more excited about a porphyry target in my life, and I'd like to hit the ground on that in May and June and be drilling that and see what we've got around that time. Lastly, our Copperview project. This is an interesting one. We acquired this very cheaply. Oddly enough, we beat my mate John Robbins to the punch. This is Kodiak's gate property, or Kodiak's main property, with their gate zone right on that northern border. We're about 5 kilometres to the north on this property. And if you look at that gate zone, there's a major structure that trends up through there. And gate and these other porphyry discoveries sit on major breaks in that structure. You'll note that structure continues on into our ground, and there's another number of major breaks in that structure. So we think that these are outstanding targets as well. We've got more work to do. We've done some IP lines across one of the targets there, one of those magnetic breaks, and found a very significant chargeability high. So I think we're a real good chance of further discoveries there as well. And then just on that, and to highlight what we're thinking, you know, as I say, we've got a very large resource base that offers our shareholders leverage to the copper price and the gold price. But I've made the point up front that discoveries still matter. And here are great examples of what we've got. So we've really got 4 wide open goals in known porphyry terrains that are screaming to be drilled out. And so 2025, a little bit different for us. The last 2 years have been characterised by us coming to understanding of the geology and doing some good geological work to try and further target those high-grade zones, particularly on the Woodjam property. This year's a little bit different for us. Given that the market's reacting positively to discoveries, we're going to get out and test, have a few shots on these wide open goals. So that Megaton, where we've already made a discovery, but we haven't drilled the guts of that system yet. We want to get in there and do that at Megaton this year. Great Plains, which I haven't mentioned yet, is to the south of the southeast deposit and all of those other great porphyries that have been discovered on Woodjam. It's a screaming large chargeability anomaly, massive chargeability anomaly. So we want to get in and test that. Poplar South, as I mentioned, is one of the best porphyry targets I've ever seen in 25 years of doing this. So we must get in and test that this year. And then our stretch target is to get in and test this Copperview anomaly this year as well, given particularly that it's right next door to Kodiak's very exciting gate zone project. And so this year, focused on discovery, we'll be drill testing a number of those targets. A little bit about the further info about the share structure. We've got, because we acquired these companies through all scrip transactions, we've probably, we've got 227 million shares out now. We've been sold off in part because of the nature of those deals. So we've got an artificially low share price. I think because people, some of those shareholders have been in those two names, Consolidated Woodjam and then Universal Copper, which we acquired. They've been in there many, many years and probably took an opportunity to sell their stock. So our share price, our market cap's artificially depressed at the moment. This is incorrect. We've only got about 1 million in cash. So, later this year, if we do want to drill, we'll have to raise some money, but we retain the option of just sitting on our hands and not exploring. I don't like to do that. We sell the company as, or pitch the company as an explorer and a developer. It's always better that you do that. Management advisors, 18% shareholding. That's jumped recently. As I mentioned, I bought another 1 million shares, and I'll continue to buy on the market. So you should see that part of the pie continue to grow. So we're in good shape there. And as I mentioned, Richard Patricio, who's a good mate of mine and has been on the board of NextGen with me, he always tells me when you see CEOs or chairmen buying their own stock, that's probably not a bad time to buy. And I've certainly been doing that, and you'll continue to see me doing that and participating in our placements in a major way as well. Very, very simple opportunity. We're massively undervalued at the moment. It's a screaming bargain. It's underpinned by that huge resource base that we've got, 4 billion pounds of copper, nearly 2 million ounces of gold in the ground, more than underpins that existing valuation. Our strategy is very, very simple. It's two-pronged. We've got the resource base and this exploration. upside. I think the copper price, look out, it's trending up again here in the last 30 days. We're at $4.14 today, affected by short-term negative sentiment coming out of China particularly, but we're seeing, demand for things like iron ore decrease or flatten, but the demand for copper continues to grow, and I think we're going to see more quantitative easing out of China as well in the not too distant future will continue to put an upward pressure on the copper price. And then that big macro theme of electrification and data center build out will continue to drive the copper price for the next 5 to 10 years. We're exploring it through a new lens. I've got a fantastic team of geologists here. I didn't mention that, but we have a geologist here, Dr. Chris Leslie, who's one of British Columbia's leading porphyry experts, been involved in a number of discoveries, including the Blackwater deposit, which Stephen Deans is building in Artemis. So we've got some really, really great geological talent to do all of this work, and good geological and technical experts, but also excellent access to capital. I think Mike and I have raised over about $1.1 billion for our various companies since 2010. So good access to capital, and we write big checks ourselves. So, we're in great shape. A little bit there about the Inventor Capital group of companies. Vizsla Silver, of course, is the flagship, but a number of other really successful companies there. I'd encourage you to have a look at COSA as well. We just did a deal with Denison on our up in the eastern Athabasca, right next door to where the team and I discovered the Hurricane deposit. And we're about to start drilling in February on that. So that's an exciting story to take note of as well. And if you ever want silver exposure, Vizsla Silver is the best place to get it. Alina, I think that's it from me.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. We do have a lot of questions, but I'll just remind everyone that you can type your questions into the chat box at any time. So, Craig, maybe I'll start off with a question on the copper price and your call on $20 a pound. So the question here is, I don't see many or really anyone calling for greater than copper at 15,000 a ton, which is about 6.8 per pound.
Yep.
But what you're saying is nearly triple of the bullish call. So can you maybe comment on that?
Yeah, look, it really just goes back to recent history and, if you look at any supply-demand dynamics in metal markets is an interesting thing. It doesn't take much of a deficit to really see dramatic increases in price. This data center demand, if copper price goes to $20 a pound, data center demand for copper is not going to drop. And we saw that last time round. I think a lot of banks are out there. A lot of people in banks are saying the incentive price for copper developments to meet this demand that's coming is $6 a pound. This is not the case. You really need to see. You would need to see $6 a pound for 5 years to see a lot of these projects develop. But then the supply response is going to be very muted. Most major projects around the world are long in the tooth. They've done their expansions where they can. As an example, the next big expansion that we can see coming is Anglo American's Los Bronces mine down in Chile. Been down there, fabulous deposit. They're talking about $20 billion of investment over the next 10 years to increase production 500,000 tonnes, or 400,000 tonnes, sorry. So we need about 20 of those, but they're not out there. The last big mine that was commissioned, my mate and one of our directors, Simon Smirlek, commissioned, was a project called Mina Justa in Peru. I worked on that as a kid back in the early 2000s for Rio Tinto when we had it. It cost $2.5 billion and took 20 years to bring that very good project into production, and it's only doing 100,000 tonnes a year. We need 70 of those over the next 5 to 10 years to keep up with demand. They're just not out there. So I think whilst you will see sustained prices above that incentive price of $6, these things always shoot on the upside massively, and I honestly think we'll see $20 or $30 a pound copper. I see Peter Epstein's just mentioned there that copper's at $4.14 today. I know I I sort of keep track of things both on Kitco and a few other sources, and CEO.ca being one of them. I think CEO.ca puts the 1 month future as their metal price, and that's at about $4.34 today.
Okay. Question on your valuation, which is currently about half a cent copper equivalent per pound, but that assumes 100% recoveries. So can you maybe comment on the potential recoveries here?
That's a great question. We haven't done much metallurgically. I would say that, again, Simon's one of the world's great metallurgists. I think that our mineralogy at all of our deposits is very, very straightforward. Chalcopyrite rich, some bornite in each of these deposits. Look, whilst we don't know yet and haven't done any met work just yet, I would suspect that we'll get reasonable recoveries in line with other projects like Mount Polly.
Okay. Next question here. Aside from Teck and other copper producers, how large is your copper equivalent resource compared to other BC junior peers?
Oh, that's an excellent question. I probably should have some comps available on that front. I don't actually know. I suppose there's quite a few projects around that don't have the sort of grade, that higher grade component that we have. But there are quite a few projects that are in that sort of 200 to 300 million tonnes of 0.4% copper equivalent. We've got 2 of those now. I suppose it's a good way to look at what we're doing here. We've sort of taken a bit of a straw hats in winter type approach in that, we bought Universal Copper, as I mentioned. Today's dollars, it's had over $50 million spent on that project. We bought it for $2.7 million in stock. And we've just taken the view that may, particularly if we make that discovery at Poplar South, that may become our flagship project. But at the moment, we've got a couple of strings to our bow. And I think at some point in time, once we've worked out which is the best project to develop, we'll focus on that and put the other one up for sale potentially in a much higher price environment. So straw hats in winter is what we're doing there.
Okay. Any intentions to add to the current land package?
It's a great question. Look, we continue, particularly at Woodjam, we just completed a transaction to acquire a property in the centre of the project area that we didn't own called Rand. We're doing, some basic, really focused on those areas and bolting on properties where we can and where it makes sense. We've largely done that. I think we've done over 12 deals in the Woodjam district to consolidate that so far. So we're sort of, just about done on that front. And I would say that if we did see, a very compelling other acquisition opportunity, we would consider it, but at the moment don't plan to.
Okay. What kind of strategic investors do you think would be interested in Woodjam? Gibraltar's life of mine could extend for 20 years from now, and Mount Polly also restarted production in 2022.
Yeah, Mount Polly's still going strong. I was up there the other day. Steve and I drove north 10 kilometres and visited the project and had a look. One logical thing to do here with if we make further discoveries is to ship that high grade material 20 or 30 kilometres up to Mount Polly and toll treat it up there, or help those guys with higher grade material. So there's an opportunity to look at that, I think. Yep.
Okay. Next question. In the gold sector, commentators say there are too many listed companies without good prospects. Do you think the junior copper sector is similar?
Yeah, I do to some extent. I think it's an unloved part of the market at the moment. I do think this AMark discovery here announced yesterday has really sort of fired things up. People are starting to look seriously again. The other thing, we did a financing with Red Cloud back in May last year, and we really, were fortunate to time the window well there. The copper price had sort of shot up from $4 to $5.10 that month. And a lot of people started looking for copper storage. I think a lot of people who came in that round and who invested that, first half of last year are now feeling like they may have been too early to the party and have sold off a little bit. But I think with the market, these discoveries seeing share prices double and triple or better, that really helps investors make a decision. I also think that the metal price rising will help. So I think this year is going to be a good year for copper.
Okay. Are there any relatively new technologies available that would be suitable to use on your rock structures that would save time or money?
No, that's a great question. Look, we're always looking out for those. I don't think that there's anything, there's some geophysical techniques that have helped, that have come along that have helped explore better. We use AI to some extent as well, so we're looking at that. What else can I tell you there? It's probably about it. When it comes to developing these projects, they'll be very straightforward, conventional open pit, bulk tonnage, large mining scenario.
Okay, Craig, can you comment on inflation and exploration costs?
That's a great question. I was having, of course, we've got the VRIC conference in town at the moment, and then Roundup. And I was chatting to some, well-known industry types. A guy called Murray John, Colin Jones, both very good explorers and in their own right. And we both came to the same conclusion. When I first started in the business, I think diamond drilling was about $100, $110 a metre, and it still is today. So all-in costs are about $300 a metre. Canada's a great place to operate. We haven't seen much price inflation for drilling costs. The US is another story. I've been looking at projects down there, and I see there's a question there of how much time I dedicate to this. This is my day job. It's 100% of my time. Anything I do outside of this is very much peripheral, and largely just board positions. But we continue to kick the tires on other copper projects around the world for Vizsla Copper. I was looking at one the other day in the US, $1,400 a metre all in. It costs us about $310 a metre all in British Columbia. So, and I don't know, some of the people on this mode have heard me talk about it, but the way I rank and prioritise targets globally is size of the prize, cost of the test, chance of success. Has to be big enough to justify you're spending your investors' money on a target. Chance of success is about endowment. If you're going to explore for uranium, you should do it in the Athabasca Basin. If you're exploring for porphyry coppers, do it in a place where there's known porphyry coppers. So that's what we're doing here. And then cost of the test is all important. You don't want to blow your brains out on very costly exploration. And here in BC, $310 a metre all in, road accessible, year-round accessible, perfect place, great price, not too much inflation seen there, thankfully.
Okay, I think this could be the last question, Craig, but what would you say to someone who says that your copper equivalent grades are a bit too low? What copper equivalent grade makes Woodjam a clear winner?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It's a good question. I must take a look at that because I think generally we do check our formulas, and I thought we have those right. So I'm going to ask the team to follow up on that, and it's a good point, a good question. Look, we've done some internal scoping study work on Woodjam here recently, mid this past year. None of this is public, so I can't really comment, other than to say that at $5 copper, a lot of things start to look very, very good. So $10 copper, I think you're going to see a lot of projects. Of course, the trouble is then this is where it's important to back people, is you've got to back people who've done it before, who can advance projects through permitting and fund those projects while they do that. A lot of people can't. So you really you want to back a team that has a project that they can advance into permitting and capture that part of the price cycle, and I think we can do that here.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Craig. I think that's it for the Q&A portion of the webinar. Just as a reminder for our audience, our next webinar will feature Kootenay Silver, and that's on January 23rd at 2 p.m. Eastern. Thanks for tuning in with us, everyone. Have a great day.
Yeah, thank you all for joining. Thanks for those wonderful questions too. Really enjoyed that.